It's time to discuss narrative changes, fights to make, and fights to avoid after UFC 308. The dust has settled, and I'm going to be matchmaking every single fighter that fought on last night's card. Ilia Topuria, there's a matchup for him, and Max Holloway, there are matchups for him. And I just got off the phone with my boy Ank, and we've got a plan for Ankalaev as well. But without further ado, let's get into this. Ilia Topuria. A lot of people are saying he's going to fight Volkanovski, and Dana White said he's not going to deny Volkanovski that opportunity because Volkanovski's so deserving. I know what Volk should do. You know, I think Volkanovski should grab one of these, put his feet on one of these, sit on one of these, and watch one of these. Okay? And just chill and do anything but fight Ilia Topuria. If it's Ilia going to America, if Ilia's coming and he's flying into the U.S., I think Max Holloway and Volkanovski should go to Canada. If Ilia Topuria is going to the gym, Volkanovski and Max Holloway need to stay at home. They need to avoid this guy no matter what. No rematches. Never. If you like Max Holloway and you like Volkanovski, you don't want to see another rematch. All right? This is what we're going to do for Ilia Topuria. His next fight should be against Islam Makhachev. That is the fight to make. I'm going to call for this relentlessly. We need to call for this relentlessly. And don't get me wrong, I would love to see a Diego Lopez matchup. That is the backup fight. That is the, all right, if we don't really get what we want, we'll get a Diego Lopez fight. But we need to make Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev. 100%. Ilia Topuria may have just racked up the two best back-to-back wins of all time. And I want him to fight a guy that prior to him racking up the two best wins of all time had the best two back-to-back wins of all time in Charles Oliveira, Volkanovski. But then he beat Volk and Dustin Poirier again. I want a top 10 versus top 10 in their prime GOAT versus GOAT fight. I know that Ilia Topuria is getting these huge matchups. Volk, Max, after Max wins the BMF title, let's keep the momentum going. This guy is in a special circumstance right now, and if we don't make this Islam Makhachev fight, we're never going to see it. These are the two best fighters in the UFC, period. If Islam Makhachev fights anyone else, he's going to move up a weight class and we'll never see this. And if Ilia Topuria fights someone else, it's going to be who at 155? Charles Oliveira? Fucking Michael Chandler? Enough. We need this fight. It's too good to pass up on. If Islam beats Ilia Topuria, that's basically GOAT status. If Ilia Topuria beats Islam, that's basically GOAT status. This is the biggest fight you can make in the lighter weight classes. What is the argument against making this?
No, man, you don't understand, man. We have to see Diego Lopez, man. You gotta have the formal title fight first, bro. We gotta do the Ray Borg fight first. Whoa, pump the brakes, man.
Why? Dude, he beat Max. That doesn't mean he's going to beat Islam. I love this whole, he beat Holloway, relax, totally different beast. He knocked the guy out. That's the hardest man to knock out ever. He knocked out the most difficult human being to KO in the history of mankind. I don't care if Islam Makhachev is bigger and can kick at southpaw. He can KO any man 145, 155 pounds. That's the fight to make. The build up to that shits on anything else. Okay? That's the fight to make. It's the fight to make. Oh, we got to see Islam versus Arman. I'd love to see that fight. Guess what? Topuria is just as dangerous. Fuck that, just as dangerous. He's way more dangerous than Arman Tsarukyan. That's a great fight, Arman versus Islam. Not even close to Topuria versus Islam Makhachev.
No, man, Topuria's a little small guy. I don't want to see that.
Stop. Arman Tsarukyan's like the same height. Okay? Fuck off with this whole, no, we got to have the formalities. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It's like Volk versus Islam. This time, Volkanovski has one hitter-quitter power in his hands. It makes it 10 times better. And then Ilia Topuria is a trash talker, whereas Volk wasn't, where that makes it 10 times better as well. Now, if that fight doesn't happen, and for whatever reason, we just have to do the other ones, the formal ones, okay, fine. Diego Lopez it is. Fair enough. Diego Lopez it is. Fine. But that's the fight to make, guys. Max Holloway, the other part of this main event. As long as he never fights Ilia Topuria again, I'm good with that. I want him to move up to 155 pounds. It's kind of crazy, by the way, how going into this fight, people are like, Holloway's on a 2-fight win streak. I think I said 2-fight win streak, maybe. 3-fight win streak. We're all forgetting he beat Arnold Allen before the TKZ fight. He beat Arnold Allen, TKZ, and Justin Gaethje back to back to back. And then now I'm seeing things like, he didn't beat these guys in his prime. Relax, pump the brakes on Ilia Topuria's hype. It's not like he beat Volk and Max in their prime. He just beat prime Max Holloway on a 3-fight win streak. Just because Max Holloway lost does not mean he's out of his prime all of a sudden. It's like Aldo losing to Conor. He lost, he's out of his prime. No, he's not. He just lost a fight because he fought someone that was better. Holloway is in his prime. Sure, this KO could affect him in the future and it could lead to a downfall, but last night he was at his best. He was in his prime. So I want to see Holloway fight either Charles Oliveira or I want to see him fight Dustin Poirier in a trilogy. I think he would beat Dustin Poirier. But, you know, now that he's been KO'd, maybe things could change. But either way, I would probably side with Max on that. I think Holloway's striking is still a little bit more elite than these 55ers. So Dustin Poirier or Charles Oliveira for Max Holloway. And by the way, I mean, let's get serious about Volkanovski. I'll actually tell you what Volkanovski should do. Volk should seriously monitor Ilia Topuria's moves. If Ilia goes up and fights Islam next, Volkanovski should swoop in and take that interim belt. And if Islam loses to Topuria and Topuria stays at 155, then Volkanovski's got a great opportunity to become champ again. If Ilia Topuria decides to stay at 145, then Volkanovski should fight Aljo. Okay? Volk should fight Aljo. He should call for Bryce Mitchell. And he should then call for Lerone Murphy and just rack up wins left and right. Because I honestly think Volk beats Lerone. I think he beats Aljo. And I think he beats Bryce Mitchell back to back to back. And you could have 3 insane wins. Volkanovski just needs to sort of starve out Ilia Topuria and his title reign. Volk needs to just kind of stake out, wait, just avoid him at all costs. Because, listen, I'm a Volkanovski fan. You guys know this, but it's just, you're running yourself into a brick wall. You're basically running off of a cliff if you fight Ilia Topuria. The way you lose to Ilia is by brutal KO. That would be 3 KO losses in a row. That's really the type of thing that can cook you and ruin your career. I don't want to see that. If I'm Volkanovski, listen, I understand for Volk, like, that's where all the glory is. It's in beating Ilia Topuria. But you know where there's also glory? Max Holloway beating Arnold Allen. That was big for Max Holloway. It wasn't a career-changing win, but it was just a solid win against a top 5 opponent. Really good win. Max Holloway beating Justin Gaethje was a great win. Volkanovski should just fight these, other guys. Don't fight Ilia Topuria. Okay? Do not fight him. He already knocked you out. You're now 36. He's just knocked out Max Holloway. He's only getting better. Does anyone want to see that? Volk fans, even the ones that can be delusional at times, do you really want to see that? Or would you rather him just get his hand raised and get a bunch of wins? Like, don't get me wrong. I don't want to see Volkanovski just hit the heavy bag. I don't want to see Volkanovski just fight Bellator fighters. I want to see him in interesting fights. I think that a Volkanovski-Lerone Murphy fight could be interesting. I think Volk beats him, but at least it's going to be a competitive matchup, right? Aljo versus Volk. Listen, that's a really good matchup. Does Volk beat him? Probably, but guess what? Aljamain Sterling's got the bantamweight skill, and it could be interesting. There could be some really good grappling exchanges. There's still fights. It's not like Volkanovski just goes in there and knocks people out with one punch. Like, we're gonna see rounds of Volk out there. We're gonna see round 2, round 3 of Volkanovski striking and grappling. And what's the alternative? Seeing him go out there, land a couple of punches, and then get KO'd in the first round? Is that what we really want to see? And then we're talking about Volkanovski like he's T. Ferg. Fuck that. Why does anyone want to see this fight? I don't want to see it. For Ilia Topuria, listen, Ilia doesn't even want to bullshit around with this fight. The only reason Ilia is down is because he knows he's going to KO him. It's a useless fight. It's not a big fight. It's either Ilia Topuria versus Diego Lopez at 145 or Ilia Topuria versus Islam Makhachev, and Arman Tsarukyan can wait out. And they can tell Arman, listen, Arman, you 100% are fighting for the title next. 100%. You just chill, heal up. We'll give you front row tickets. Okay? But we're not doing Volk versus Ilia. We're not doing it. I know Dana White is saying, listen, Volk's been a good company, man. I know he's been a good company, man. You're going to repay him by giving him a knockout? This is the thing, man. It's like, this is the worst time for Volkanovski to be getting his pat on the back and his thank you. This is not a thank you. This is not the type of fucking gift that you want Volkanovski to be getting. It's a nightmare. Khamzat Chimaev, he should fight Dricus du Plessis next. I think we're all in agreement with that. That is the best middleweight fight you can make right now. And it's a fascinating fight. Dricus, massive for the division, like a tank. He's got that drunken style, the funky, sloppy boppy style. And Khamzat Chimaev, who just seems to be unstoppable in the first round. I think Dricus has a really good chance of surviving the first round. Okay, but you never know. Khamzat's welterweight skill grappling might just be too much for him. But that's the fight to make 100%. For Whitaker, I think he should fight Sean Strickland or Cal Baraujo. Those are the fights that I want to see. I'd say a Sean Strickland fight, unless the UFC is just planning on doing Strickland versus the winner of Khamzat Chimaev versus Dricus du Plessis. But you know what? I think Sean Strickland, 1-fight win streak against Paulo Costa. It's not like he held the belt for that long. Why not do him versus Robert Whitaker? Why not? I understand if Whitaker beats him, it's kind of unfortunate because then we don't get to see the rematch between Strickland and DDP, which is a really sought-after rematch. And it's like, okay, Whitaker beats Strickland. Now what we're going to do, Whitaker versus DDP 2, Whitaker versus Chimaev 2. We're not really looking forward to that much. But I just think Whitaker versus Sean Strickland is such a good matchup. It's too good to pass up on. It's a dream matchup. Striker's delight. Fair enough. You don't do that, then let's do Robert Whitaker versus Cal Baraujo. I think that's a good fight to make as well. I think Whitaker would beat Cal Baraujo. But unfortunately for Whitaker, if he doesn't get the Strickland fight, it's back to the Kelvin Gastelums at the Apex type of fights. It's back to the Cannoniers type of fights. Whitaker recently has been getting these really big fights. And, his jaw got fucked up, got brutally injured against Khamzat Chimaev, and now he's kind of back to the queue. Yeah, Magomed Ankalaev. I think Ank should fight Tom Aspinall. Really. I say Ankalaev just takes Tom Aspinall's swag and moves up and fights Tom Aspinall. That's the fight that I want to see. Ankalaev, Aspinall at heavyweight. Now for Rakic, I want to see Rakic fight Anthony Smith again. No, I'm fucking around. It's obviously Alex Pereira next. I know that people love to troll Ankalaev and they're saying things like, give him Smith, whatever, but it's pretty clear that he's next up. And again, I usually like MMA math, but this time we got to say no MMA math. Just because Ankalaev's going to a decision with Rakic doesn't mean he can't knock out Alex Pereira. Doesn't mean that can't happen. Adesanya went to a decision against Cannonier, a little pitter-pat, patty-wap decision, and then KO'd Alex Pereira 2 fights later. Adesanya's had his little pitter-pat, patty-wap decisions, and then he's gotten his KOs. Ankalaev could get a big old KO, and he could actually pull out the wrestling. Now, I don't think he beats Pereira because I don't think his wrestling is that dominant. I mean, listen, I know that he could be wrestling a lot in training camp. He could be taking a different approach depending on what the fight is, but this guy is a striker for the most part. I think it's clear by now, and I just don't think his striking is on Pereira's level. I love Ankalaev. I've trained with the guy, but I just think Pereira's a little bit more dangerous. I think his kicks are much more dangerous than Rakic's. I think that the damage that he can put on you, it really wears on people. I mean, Mark Goddard said just the sound of Pereira's punches landing on Khalil Roundtree was something he had never even heard before. It was like a freaky type of sound. And I think it's only a matter of time before a guy, high IQ striker like Alex Pereira, gets Magomed into the later rounds when Magomed's starting to buckle around and do the buckle dance. And I think he's going to have him, buckling around the octagon like a fucking pilgrim. Magomed, he's got the Abraham Lincoln beard too, but you know what I mean? Magomed, brother, this guy buckle around like pilgrim, brother. You know what I mean? I think that Alex Pereira is going to have him buckling around. We got to get him one of those buckle hats, those Quaker hats. So I'm going to be rooting for him. I'll be in his corner. But yeah, him versus Pereira is next. Rakic versus Jamal Hill would be great. The problem with Rakic is Rakic is like the big monster type of build. And he's always after the first exchanges in the first round. He resorts to running across the octagon or circling around the cage with his back against the cage, and he needs to fight more aggressive. Rakic needs to bulldoze people, okay? Now, again, against Magomed, it's hard to do that because Magomed's got a really crispy left hand and he's sneaky as a counter striker. But I think with most of these light heavyweights, Rakic could just bulldoze most of them. I want to see Rakic versus Jamal Hill. I think that's a really good fight to make. Lerone Murphy and Dan Ige. I want to see Lerone Murphy fight Volk. That's the fight to make, in my opinion. I want to see Lerone Murphy versus Volkanovski. I know it's not a big fight. They're probably not going to make it. It's probably not realistic, but I want to see Volkanovski versus up-and-coming, long-rangey striker with okay grappling, someone that's going to be well-rounded. That's the fight that I want to see. And if that's not going to be the fight to make, then let's do Lerone Murphy versus the loser of Aljamain Sterling versus Movsar Evloev. Dan Ige versus, what's his name? Gene Silva is a really good fight to make. Gene Silva just knocked out Drew Dober. Amazing fight, but let's do Dan Ige versus Gene Silva, 145. That'd be a sick fight. If Gene Silva wins that, then he's breaking into the top 10. On to the next one, Shara Magomedov versus Armen Petrosyan. Shara Magomedov versus Michel Pereira. That's the fight I want to see. Michel Pereira gassing out against Fluffy Hernandez, but he's still dangerous on the feet. It's not like Shara's going to take him down. And obviously, Michel Pereira still got that welterweight striking. So that's going to be a fascinating matchup. Shara Magomedov, he's finally coming into his own, and he's looking like he's getting comfortable in the UFC now. That was a brutal KO. He still doesn't have crazy pop, right? It's not like he's got amazing pop all of a sudden just because he knocked someone out with the most brutal technique we've ever seen, but the technique was unbelievable. And this is what I wanted to see from Shara Magomedov. Before he came into the UFC, I wanted to see these like flying knee KOs, these flashy KOs, and we haven't really seen a whole lot of them. We finally got one, and it was on another level. It was spectacular. Armen Petrosyan, who cares? All right? I mean, honestly, Armen Petrosyan lost this fight. Listen, he looked pretty good, but let's do Armen Petrosyan versus Duncan too, okay? Ibo Aslan versus Rafael Cerqueira. Honestly, I kind of like Ibo Aslan versus Anthony Smith. I think that's a good fight to make. Anthony Smith doesn't have to fight a big name. I think Ibo Aslan, he's kind of like a similar archetype to Vitor Petrino, just kind of a banger. You know, he's a West, like Diaz. He's who Diaz thinks he is. He's a West Coast banger, right? Ibo Aslan, let's give him an Anthony Smith fight. I think Anthony Smith, even though he's getting older, I do think this is an approachable fight for him. It's a winnable fight. Rafael Cerqueira, someone coming off of the Dana White Contender Series. Jeff Neal versus RDA. Jeff Neal had a great performance. This was one of those Jeff Neal, who the heck is ever going to beat this guy type of performances. But now it's time for a Jeff Neal, clinch him up, stink him up type of fight. And I think that we could see a great Jeff Neal, Gilbert Burns, clinch him up, stink him up type of fight. I think Jeff Neal versus Gilbert Burns would be a sick fight. But if you're not going to do a Gilbert Burns fight, then I also think that who's that other welterweight that just got like a crazy win? You could do Jeff Neal versus Carlos Leal. Now that's a fight I kind of want to see. Okay, Jeff Neal versus Carlos Leal. Let's make it happen. Actually, listen, this is because I want to look after Gilbert Burns and I don't want him to get knocked out. Jeff Neal versus Carlos Leal is a sick fight. Let's do that. I know that's a huge jump up for Carlos Leal, but he just beat Renat. And they're not going to give him the credit because he got robbed, but that actually would be a sick fight. Carlos Leal is a fucking beast. His durability is next level. He's got like this ridiculous cardio. He's huge for the division. And that's actually a fight I want to see. I know it's not that realistic, but what are you going to do for Jeff Neal? Buckley, who just knocked out Wonderboy? I don't think so. And then RDA. I'd like to fight RDA. Honestly, I feel like I could go in there and do my thing. Honestly, Jeff Neal made him look like that, but let's be realistic. I think that RDA should fight Renat Fakhretdinov, okay? I don't know. I think that's a good fight, man. Renat versus RDA could be a good fight. Mateusz Rebecky and Mai Taibek Odoby. Let's do Mateusz Rebecky versus Beneil Dariush. Let's do that. All right, that'd be a really dangerous matchup for Beneil Dariush. But Beneil Dariush, it seems like he's been KO'd 10 times in a row. He's only been knocked out twice in a row. But, this guy's top 10 still. And I think it's time that we give Mateusz Rebecki a big bump up in competition. So I'm thinking either Beneil Dariush or Benoit Saint Denis for Mateusz Rebecki. Give him a big bump up. This was the war of a century. And I think that although Mike Tybeck Odoby wasn't ranked, he was on a really good win streak. Elvis Brenner. And then before that, he beat Uros Medic. Those are really solid wins. Those are not guys that are far off from rankings. And because both of these guys took so much damage, it's like, all right, do we really have to put these guys through the meat grinder and have these guys fight 3 other tough, unranked opponents? Or should we just kind of give them that bump up and that chance? And I don't think that Beneil Dariush is some unstoppable, just because he's ranked. Like, Beneil Dariush is compromised. He's on a 2-fight loss streak. It'd be an amazing fight as far as the scrambles go. Beneil Dariush's power. Rebecki's got pop. Mike Tybeck Odoby, he took a lot of damage. You lost this one. I think Mateusz Rebecki may have just had a little bit more experience. But Mike Tybeck Odoby, I kind of want to see a Guram Kutateladze matchup. I think that's a really good matchup. I would hate to see either of those guys lose. But I think either a Guram Kutateladze matchup or a Joel Alvarez matchup. And I swear, I honestly think a lot of these unranked lightweights are better than the ranked lightweights. Guys like Joel Alvarez, Mateusz Rebecki, Mike Tybeck Odoby. There's so many killers outside of the rankings, especially Gene Silva after he beat Drew Dober. And then you've got guys like Beneil Dariush and Dan Hooker and Gamrot that are ranked. And don't get me wrong, Gamrot's good, Dan Hooker's good, but I don't know. I'm almost more impressed by these unranked lightweights. And I'm really happy that the lightweight division is getting really good again, because it seemed like for about a year and a half, 2 years, when it was Dariush at the top of the division and Gamrot at the top of the division, it was really like no man's land outside of the top 6. We have the usual Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, and then there's Oliveira and Makhachev, and then everyone else is like, they're all right. But now we really have a lot of killers coming up the rankings. So Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Chris Barnett. I think we should do Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Mick Parkin. Honestly, I think that'd be a really good fight. I think Kennedy Nzechukwu would show Mick Parkin levels. But I also kind of want to see Mick Parkin and Shamil the Blob Gaziev fight too. Those would really be some great fights. So if you don't do Kennedy versus Mick Parkin, then maybe we can do Kennedy Nzechukwu versus, I'd say, like Marcos Rogerio de Lima. That'd be a really good fight, because he just beat unranked Chris Barnett. So I think either a Mick Parkin or a Marcos Rogerio de Lima, who I think is more dangerous than Mick Parkin. Those would be some really good fights. Maybe even a Derek Lewis. That could be a really good one too. Derek Lewis, Kennedy Nzechukwu, that'd be a great fight. That could be similar to Gane versus Lewis. I'd love to see that, actually. You know what? Fuck all those other matchups. Let's do Derek Lewis versus Kennedy Nzechukwu. Long, rangy striker who's going to have a speed advantage, who's clearly a better striker than Derek Lewis, but Derek Lewis always has that crazy power. I think that's actually the fight to make, and we'll do Mick Parkin versus Shamil. Well, let's get on to the next one. Basharat. I say Farid Basharat versus Sean O'Malley. That's the one I want to see. I just think this guy's been just running through people. The way Farid Basharat talks is as if you're watching a highlight reel of Hamzat Chimaev ragdolling people and finishing them in the first round and screaming, I want to kill everybody. That's basically what it is. And then the way he fights, it's like the sound that you would hear if someone steps on a foam duck, like a duck dog toy that makes that sound. But if we're being serious, I think that maybe a Vinicius Oliveira, because Farid Basharat has been talking about, he wants to take a ranking fight, he wants a ranking spot. Let's give him a guy that's super dangerous, that has finishing ability, that's close to being ranked. Let's get him in there with a Vinicius Oliveira. Let's test Vinicius Oliveira's takedown defense, or maybe even someone like Ricky Simone. Because I think that both of those guys have power. They're both strong. They're explosive. And Farid Basharat, he's not really fought one of these strong, dangerous featherweights. So let's actually give him a dangerous matchup, and maybe then we could talk about a ranking spot. But he's not near the rankings yet, especially with a decision over Victor Hugo. So yeah, it's time for a dangerous matchup. I say Ricky Simone, who is not too dangerous. He used to be looked at as like a future dark horse of the division. I think he's clearly not that anymore, but I'd say Vinicius or Ricky Simone. Both of those guys fought each other last time. I think that'd be a really good fight. And I think, again, Fareed, you want to be ranked? Well, the bantamweight division is stacked, and we got to see you fight someone that's really dangerous, because these fighters that he's been up against, they're not that great. They're not that dangerous, and you can't get ranked at bantamweight unless you at least beat a couple of those guys. So, but anyway, guys, that's basically it. I will be doing a GOAT list, a updated GOAT list soon, so stay on the lookout for that. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Until next time.